we've reached the end of another Formula 1 season, so let's review it team by team. We'll kick off with Red Bull, the champions, and honestly, what can you say? They've absolutely dominated. Okay, a bit of a season of two halves, really, and by two halves, I mean the two sides of the garage. And frankly, their year can be best summed up by some videos I've done this year. Exhibit Perez and Exhibit Verstappen. I'll come back to Checo, but Max first. He's been untouchable, and he's really shown everyone what he can achieve when he's performing at his best, and all thing around him is also working just right to allow him to do so. He's broken so many records, and that's really the best way to sum up his season. And this is something I wanted to touch on because that records broken by Max video I did, turns out I did miss quite a few records as shown by you guys pointed out the ones I missed in the comments, so I wanted to mention them here. So thank you to, and I'm gonna mispronounce some of these names, so I apologize. Jerome Quandra 9104, Zonix, Paul Watson 9217, Stefan Veenstra, Jacobus 666, Elko Van Renes 1352, Frood Sigmund 72, Redline F80, Football Nerd 277, Jonathan C, 40SP, KGI _ Kilco NL, SX5R, HHFGHTRR, and Tamint Hossein 6349 for these, by the way. First, a few for Red Bull specifically. They broke the record for the highest percentage of wins by a constructor in a season, and Red Bull broke the record for the most wins by a constructor in a season. They broke the record for the most constructors points scored in a season, and Red Bull could have won the Constructors' Championship with only one car by a landslide. Not a record, just a crazy stat. However, Max had the highest percentage of laps led in a season. Not to mention he's the first driver in F1 history to lead over 1,000 laps in a single season, which is insanity. He had the highest percentage of points scored in a season, and this ties into another one, which it's not really a record, but just a really interesting point. He has the lowest percentage of points missed in a season. As I'm recording this, I haven't calculated out exactly what the percentage is of points he missed, but it'll be on screen here, along with, of course, the comment that pointed this out. And speaking of points, not really a record, but just a crazy stat. His average points per race this season is like 26.1 points per weekend, which is mad. I'm pretty sure this is a record, so it was mentioned. Most races in a season of leading at least one lap at 21. Most wins not starting on pole in a season. This was a record he got last year that I actually forgot about when talking about records he already had. He has the most wins from different grid slots at 9. Is the first driver to win every European race in a season. He'll have the highest cost to renew a super license in F1 history of around 1.3 million euros or so, I think. As it was pointed out, he broke every record that ends in by a Dutchman. And also another one I forgot about for records that he already had coming into this year. He has the largest comeback in a season to win the championship from 46 points down last year. He had the most wins from different grid positions in a season last year at 7. He had the most wins in F1 before scoring a pole, which I actually didn't realize that was a record, but 7. And I don't know what the record is for most records broken in a season, but I'm pretty sure he broke that, and most records held in F1 at any one time by a driver. Again, don't know what the record is there, but it's probably been broken by Max. And not to mention, this isn't really a record, but just another crazy, insane fact. Since joining Red Bull, Max has scored points in every race he's finished apart from Belgium 2016, which is wild. And finally, this one isn't really serious, it's poking a bit of fun, but it is true, so I'm mentioning it anyway. And as a Leclerc fan, this one hurts a little bit. Most Charles Leclerc poles converted to wins. It's just poking a bit of fun. It is true, so I thought I'd mention it anyway. And yeah, as Tamin says, he just has too many records to put in one video. Honestly, I was bound to miss some, which is why I said at the end of that video, let me know if I missed any. I did miss some, and thank you to everyone who let me gain that I missed ones. So now that we've covered Max, I think that sums him up pretty nicely. On to Checo, and it must be said he did pull it back from his mid-season struggles, which is good to see, and something I think he really needed to do, especially with Daniel Ricciardo coming back in with AlphaTauri. if he didn't manage to pull it back and he lost second in the Drivers' Championship, then I think Red Bull would have been less than pleased. There would have been a conversation, but in the end, he's been able to give Red Bull that something they've never achieved before, and that's a 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship. It's not been a good season by any means, but it definitely could have been a lot worse. He will, however, want to try and avoid a repeat of this year in 2024, especially given at the end of next year he is out of contract. I do not see him keeping his seat at Red Bull, that much has to be said. I don't think anyone does, but he'll want to make sure he has a better 2024 so he can maybe, if he's going to be looking to stay in Formula 1 in 2025 and beyond, get himself in the frame for a seat elsewhere. And also he'll want a better 2024 because who knows, their rivals, they could be a lot better. Mercedes or Ferrari or McLaren might be a lot stronger in 24, giving Red Bull a bit more of a more difficult time, and they'll need Checo up there with Max on a regular basis to be able to fend off their rivals so they don't end up in a 2v1 situation. But yeah, not really, there is nothing else you can say about Red Bull because overall they've had a great season. Some bad moments, yeah, especially with Checo, but overall it's been great for them. Now on to Ferrari next, and Leclerc first. Bit of a season to forget for him, but at the same time, I think his season's a little underrated as well when you really think about it. I mean, first of all, the reasons that made it a bit of a season to forget really aren't his fault. It's things outside of his control. Aside from that Miami qualifying crash, that one was on him. And Zandvoort, I'm just kind of gonna leave that in a bit of a unfortunate grey area because the lap 1 contact he had, it was lap 1, and a slippery lap 1. It was a racing incident, but from there it was just unlucky that the broken wing damaged his floor. Aside from that, it's been mechanical failures that were not his fault, grid penalties as a result of that, which was not his fault. Then there was the team effing up his strategy in either qualifying and or the race, which wasn't his fault because he's not a fucking strategist. The race strategy is the strategy team's job. And then there was the plank where disqualification in Austin, which again, not his fault. And then there was Spain, which I still really don't know what to say about Spain. That's just a fucking anomaly what happened. But despite all that, he's had some standout weekends and performances. First off, the entire Las Vegas weekend, he was on top form. And as I said in my Vegas review video, he would have won that race if it wasn't for that bloody second safety car. But regardless, he still took the fight to Red Bull. And as James Hinchcliffe mentioned in this article on the F1 website, it's the first time in God knows how long someone has bested Verstappen in a straight up fight over a stint. Not to mention he had one of, if not the overtake of the season. It's definitely a candidate for overtake of the season anyway. But there hasn't just been Vegas. He was really impressive in qualifying and in the race back in Austria where he was second in base. He was as always brilliant in Azerbaijan, taking his 3rd consecutive pole on the streets of Baku, finishing 3rd in the race after a great and smart drive to be able to hold off Alonso, and he had pole and finished 2nd for the sprint race as well. There was Spa, there was Mexico, there was the race in Canada where, yeah, Ferrari making that smart call to stay out under the safety car, it helped a lot, but he still had a great race. His final qualifying run in Saudi Arabia, yes, he had a grid penalty, but that was some lap he put in. And he had a brilliant overtake around the outside of George Russell at turns 1 and 2 in Suzuka on his way to P4. Not to mention his last 5 qualifying results. P1, P1, P2, P1, P2. 5 front rows in a row. And that last one, the last run in Abu Dhabi, where the bloody hell did that come from? It's just Charles one-lap master Leclerc. He's tied now with Lauda for the 2nd most poles of any Ferrari driver. And away from qualifying, he's also the only driver apart from Max to not finish outside the top 5 since Spa, which is really good consistency. He's had a lot of bad luck and crappy moments this year, sure, but Leclerc's also had a lot of really good ones too, and overall the season's maybe not been as bad for him as some may think it's been. It definitely could have been better, but it definitely could have been worse, because despite all the crappy luck and bad moments, he was consistently in the points when he wasn't being effed over, and he still managed to finish tied with Alonso for P4 in the championship, which, okay, he said P4, he doesn't really care where he finished in the Drivers' Championship, but it's still impressive, all things considered. Since Japan, when that upgrade came in that really helped him, he's done so good. Almost like that upgrade, combined with seeing Sainz getting pole in Monza, get pole in Singapore, the win in Singapore, almost like trying to make his bid to be Ferrari's de facto team leader. It's like Charles just saw that and went, yeah, no. Not gonna happen, mate. He's had a really strong end to the season, and if Ferrari can build a good car for 2024, which they'll be aiming to do, and Leclerc can carry that strong end of this season into a strong start to next season, that could bode really well for him and Ferrari. Whereas Red Bull are gonna come on strong next year, but if Ferrari get the car right, they could be in a really good position. But now on to Sainz. He got beaten at the end of the year, but he did have a good year. He was the only non-Red Bull driver to win a race this year, where it was very smart of him towards the end of said race to keep Norris in his DRS to help protect him from the charging Mercedes cars. He was consistently in the points. Does that helicopter want to fly any lower? Seriously, does that helicopter want to fly any freaking lower? Where was I? Like, Sainz was consistently scoring good points, and he had a couple of great qualifying laps. Overall, it was a decent season for him. He had a good year. And again, yes, he's had crappy moments. He wasn't happy about the penalty in Austria. Abu Dhabi was a weekend to forget, and the grid drop in Vegas, which I get why he was pissed about that, because it was a really shitty scenario. Although, with that being said, I get you were pissed, but stop throwing your toys out the pram and move on, please. And also, Vegas, it may have been a crappy weekend for you, yes, but Ferrari overall, it was not. I'm going to choose to believe when you meant Ferrari, you meant as in your side of Ferrari. And also, what was that traffic he was speaking about that he apparently got on that qualifying in Abu Dhabi on his last lap? The only traffic I saw was in the pit lane on the exit of it. But I may not like Sainz all that much, but look, he had a good year. He had some really good moments. And Ferrari in general, there is a little work that still needs to be done in some areas. Their strategies sometimes still aren't the best. Communication, car placement on track and qualifying sometimes. They're getting there, but they still have a bit of work to do. But they have really improved. Vasseur coming in has really helped the team and has helped them improve, and honestly I don't think they would have had as good of a 2023 if Binotto was still in charge. But one area where Ferrari have really improved this year is the pit stops. They had 5 fastest pit stops this year, plus a sub 2 second stop. And this being an area that Ferrari have really struggled in recent years. With all that being said though, Ferrari are a good example of, it's not how you start the season that matters, it's how you respond to that start and go on to end the year that counts. Because they didn't have a brilliant start to the year, but they pulled it back and they fought back to really challenge for P2 in the Constructors, and they almost got it. Though they did miss out despite Leclerc's on-the-ball creative strategic thinking towards the end of the race to let Checo by to try and help him get a 5-second gap. Look at it this way, they do get more wind tunnel time than Mercedes, so P3 has its advantages. The season could have been better without a few mistakes that they made. They could have been P2, but shit happens, and it's better that they make the mistakes and learn from them now when they done a head championship contending car than in another year when they may have a really good car. And as pointed out by Sarah here, Ferrari had one goal this year after that start, and that was to improve their car and their performances, improve as a team, and they really did. So yeah, overall I would agree with Sarah here and say it was a good season for Ferrari. I'd be happy. They may want to work this out though, because seriously, as pointed out by Sarah, how can teammates be so different? It really makes no sense. Well, the only real way to work this out is someone has to compromise, because Charles likes oversteer and Carlos likes understeer, and frankly I think that someone who will have to compromise will be more likely to be Sainz, because as we've seen, oversteer has proven to be better for Ferrari in terms of results. Just look at the first part of 2022, for God's sake. Let's pick Mercedes now. Got P2 in the championship in the end, thanks to Checo having a penalty. By their lofty standards, they'll probably have been hoping for a better season, and they perhaps didn't really lick the car as much. And yeah, they've gone winless for the first time in a season since 2011, which is crazy. But sometimes there's seasons like this one, and Mercedes will no doubt be happy to be at the end of it. Though overall, it's not been the worst. It's been a decent season for them. Hamilton will probably be very happy to see the back of the W14 along with the rest of the Mercedes fans. It's one thing the Mercedes fans and us Ferrari fans have in common. We are both freaking delighted to see the backs of those cars. But in the end, Hamilton got P3 in the championship, despite maybe not liking the car so much, and he was pretty consistent, as you would expect from a driver like Lewis. I mean, come on, he's a 7-time world champion. And that consistency is what you need to have in F1, and it's paid off for him. It got P3 top 3 in the championship, which he didn't do last year. He did better than he did last year, but he did still massively outscore his teammate, who I must say was a little more disappointing this year than he was last year, where he actually beat Hamilton. Russell kind of just ended up in no man's land, and I can't say I noticed him that much to end up with, to be honest. Perhaps it was just something with the car he didn't really like, but Who knows? Look, Mercedes had their moments where they were really impressive, like in Spain, where they were legit the second quickest team. Hamilton in Hungary in qualifying. In Austin before he was disqualified. In Mexico, where some say Ferrari are still waiting for the mediums Hamilton was on there to drop off. It hasn't been the worst season. It's not been overly bad, but as I said, by their lofty standards, if I can English correctly, they'll have been hooping for better and will be looking for, like their rivals will be as well, a big improvement over the winter to close the gap to Red Bull and get back to their championship fighting ways that we got so used to between 2014 and 2021. At McLaren, they're perhaps a better example than Ferrari, and perhaps the best example in the grid of it's not how you start the season that matters, it's how you respond to that start and go on to end the year that counts. Because I do not think anyone could have expected them to finish P4 in the Constructors after that dreadful start to the year they've had. There's been mistakes, sure, but as I said with Ferrari, it's better to make the mistakes when you don't have a car that's championship worthy. You can learn from them and not make the mistakes when you do have that car. And I'd say again, yep, I know this video here that I did back in the summer, it's aged very, very poorly. Lando Norris, since those upgrades came in, he has been so good. He charged up to being a true contender for P4 in the Drivers' Championship. Didn't quite get it in the end. He was only 1 point off though. And as I said, he makes mistakes. Yes, he's now equal with Nick Heidfeld for most podiums without a win, but his time for winning will come. And that time could be next season if McLaren can keep it together and continue this good form over the winter and into next year. That's going to be the crucial thing for them, I think. I'm kind of holding my breath a little bit on McLaren for next year at the moment, because if the last couple of years over the winter, they improved through the season, but then over the winter everything fell apart for the start of the next season. So I'm gonna kind of hold my breath a little bit, see how they do, but if they can keep it together over the winter, then that win could come for Lando next year. And honestly, if Norris can get the car, he could very well challenge for a championship in the years to come. Then Oscar Piastri, the Rookie of the Year, not that he had massive competition on that front, he had an incredible rookie season. Got a sprint race win, got a few podiums to his name, a front row start or two. I've been really, really impressed with him this year, and he'll be one to watch in the coming years, because like I said for Norris, if he gets the car, he can very well challenge for a championship, and I am looking forward to seeing what he can achieve in the coming years. Aston Martin, I think they have reason to be happy, but overall, I am still a bit disappointed with them this year. The first half of the season, they were great, but since the summer, it's been overall pretty disappointing for them, save for a few podiums. They started the season so strong, and they genuinely looked like they were the second quickest team, but over the time, they just fell away so badly and to finish 5th. And given they were 7th last year, 5th is an improvement, but a disappointment still given what could have been if they didn't mess up and they didn't get the upgrades wrong and the development wrong. It could have been higher than 5th. Alonso, overall, it has been a positive season to a point. He's proved that despite being 42, he can still race at the front and score podiums. He did have a good season, despite the, case of what could have been. And that case being, if Aston didn't scuff up the development, he could have won Monaco if the team didn't mess up the strategy. But he's finished in the top 5 of the championship, which is pretty positive. And it's for the first time in 10 years for him. And given where Aston Martin were last year, I don't think any of us kind of expected that coming into this season. So overall, I would say a good season for Fernando specifically. And Stroll, well, he had his moments where he decided to not be crap, but all in all, I think it would do the team good to replace him. Not that they will, of course, because his dad owns the team. At Alpine, they'll have been hooping for mayor for this year. It was a bit of a messy year for them, to be honest. Management changes, reliability still an issue because, well, they're French, they have a Renault engine, of course there's reliability issues. Perhaps a couple of tensions with the drivers. We'll go to Ocon first on the drivers. He, I don't think, will have been the happiest to have been beaten by his teammate in said teammate's first year with the team. But generally, Ocon kind of flew under the radar for me this year, except for a few moments. At Monaco, he was really great, and he held his own. He held his cool against Sainz, who was put on a lot of pressure, and then in Vegas as well, coming back to that P4 finish. And also the fact that he did have the most retirements of anybody this year, and most of them due to reliability, because, as I said, of course he had shit reliability. He drove a car with a Renault engine, but he was consistently points challenging when his car cooperated and didn't conku on him. So that's a good thing, and I gotta give him credit for continuing to drive in Qatar after throwing up in his fucking helmet helmet, and going on to finish P7, by the way. Gasly on the other side of the garage, overall, I think he can be happy with his season a bit. His first season in F1 outside of the Red Bull program, of course, and like Ocon, he was regularly challenging for points, which for the midfield is what you aim for. He, like Ocon, had his standout moments like the sprint race in Belgium, and then the very next race weekend in Zandvoort, finishing on the podium in that very tricky and changing conditions, and then qualifying in Las Vegas, managing to stick it in what became P4 after penalties. He may have been hoping for more, but he put in great performances overall. Singapore and Austin as well stand out. Although while there is reason to be pleased with the season overall, maybe not the greatest season for Alpine, having finished 4th last year, they'd have been hoping for more than kind of being in no man's land in terms of the constructors this year and slipping back to 6th. But I mean, it wasn't terrible for them either. They had their moments. They were kind of just a little bit of a middle of nowhere, especially after McLaren got their act together. Williams should be really happy with their season. I think they've had a great year because Alex Albon, well, he was continuing to prove that he is a great driver, and he was a regular points challenger in the second half of the season and also scored good points in the first half too. Don't forget, he's had the best season for a Williams driver since perhaps Lance Stroll actually in 2017. What Albon has proved this year is that he's definitely gonna be a factor in the driver market silly season next year because he, as well as more than half the grid, is out of contract and other teams are gonna be interested in him. Of course, we all know where I think he'll be in 2025 and where I want him to go, but where do you think he'll be? Although it will be crucial for him to kind of continue what he's achieved this year into next year. And honestly, if Williams can kind of keep this train going, then I really think he can. Logan Sargent hasn't been the most impressive, but as we saw with Nick De Vries, he could have been more unimpressive. As I'm writing and recording this on the weekend of the final race, after the final race, we do not know if he's being retained for 2024. I think Williams are keen to keep him. I'm indifferent on if he should stay or if he should go. Perhaps give him a second season where he can no longer hide behind the, well, he's a rookie blanket, and if he doesn't impress, then replace him. There is Frederick Vesti kind of hanging around, kind of just like lurking there, that could potentially take his seat, but apart from him, I don't think he has any more kind of competition for the seat. Sargent has had some not so good moments when it counts as well. I'm thinking of Zandvoort Q3 when he crashed it there. He did still score points though, or rather a point. Was that thanks to disqualifications? Well, yes it was, but that's racing and he still got himself into the position at the checkered flag to be promoted up to that P10 position. But now overall, Williams had a great year. The team's best since 2017 actually, and that's gonna look great on everyone in the team who put in the work to make it happen, and on James Vowles, who not only was in his first year as team principal of Williams, but as team principal at all. I had really good hopes for him when he was announced ahead of the start of the season, having spent years and years at Mercedes kind of learning there. He became really highly regarded there, went over to Williams, and he has really impressed. I'm looking forward to seeing where he can lead Williams in the coming years, but I think the big test for him will be the 2026 regulation change. Well, first of all, how Williams will be doing next year, and then beyond that, the 2026 reg change. Now on to AlphaTauri. They ended up impressing me a lot more than I expected towards the beginning of the season. A lot of that has been thanks to improvements and also Tsunoda, who I'll get to in a second. The car really improved as the season went on, and also binning off De Vries, which it really does feel like it was a lifetime ago. And then they brought in Ricciardo and Lawson, both of whom who went on to do a really good job. It was a shame for Lawson to miss out on a full-time seat for 24, but it'll be good to see what Ricciardo can do over a full season nowadays. And by nowadays, I mean after the whole McLaren saga. And see if he can produce more performances like what we saw from him in Mexico. And then Tsunoda, he had a lot of expectation on him coming into this year, with Gasly leaving the team and Yuki now being in that position where he needed to step it up and prove himself as a team leader. And he did just that. He's really stepped it up this year, and he made his claim as that team leader, not only against De Vries, but also kind of against Ricciardo. Really, he asserted that, look, right now he is the team leader, and he'll need to continue that into 2024 against Ricciardo. And on 2024, honestly, who knows what the team will be like? New name, new boss, who knows? But in terms of drivers, at the very least, I think they'll be fine. And just to mention, Franz Tost, enjoy your retirement, or whatever you're going to be doing now. Over to Alfa Romeo next. Now, honestly, I think this might be the shortest section of the video because I hardly noticed them this year. They just didn't really do anything. They weren't terrible, they weren't great, they didn't make any big waves or much noise, they were just kind of there. I have to throw praise their way for the race in Qatar because they ended up having a good race there with Joe. Double points for that race. And Joe specifically, I feel like his drive from the back to P9 wasn't really mentioned much. It kind of went under the radar with everything, with the shit show that was that race weekend. So I'll mention it now and throw his praise his way through because it was pretty good. Now, after all, it was their only double point score of the season. This was, of course, their last season as Alfa Romeo. They'll be back to Sauber for 2024 as Alfa Romeo stops that title sponsorship partnership. Perhaps not the greatest season to part ways with Alfa Romeo with, but yeah, I just hardly noticed them this year. They were just there. And so as a result, I have basically nothing to say on them. And finally, Haas. They've been disappointing. It just never really got going for them, did it? Nothing really seemed to work out. They had problems with their car, just treating the tires like they're blocks of cheese and the car itself is the greater. The upgrade they brought in Austin did not do anything for them. In fact, as we saw in the last few races, the old spec car was actually better. They're definitely going to be disappointed with their season and they'll be hoping to do better next year. The driver specifically, Hülkenberg, I don't think anyone really knew how he'd do this year, given he'd been out of a full-time race seat for a few years, and he had his moments, like in qualifying generally, he was really good, and in Canada specifically for qualifying. Or scoring those points in Melbourne, even if those 6 points were scored via a little bit of assistance from half the field dying, but a point remains that those 6 points are the only points he scored this year, and that was in round 3. His season definitely could have been better, but look, it could have been worse, and he did what he could with the equipment he had. And a similar statement kind of goes for Magnussen. He did what he could with what he had, and what the Haas boys had was quite frankly a crap car. He scored points in more races, though it was half as many points in total at 3 opposed to 6. K-Mag had his moments this season where he was quite impressive. Miami especially comes to mind, where he qualified P4, and then was for a while in the race. He was genuinely fighting with a driver who many consider as one of the best on the grid. Well, I do anyway. Haas have definitely had worse seasons, 2021, but they've had better ones as well. And with that, the 2023 season is at its end. And just to mention my race of the season, definitely Vegas. That race was so worth waiting for. Go watch my Vegas review for my thoughts on it. In the opinion of some, it's maybe not been the most exciting season in terms of a title fight. Yeah, it's been dull, but look, ignore Max, and it's been decent. F1 finally returned to Las Vegas after 40 years. A race which had the most overtakes in a dry race since China 2016, by the way. The overall record for most overtakes in a race was broken by the Dutch Grand Prix with 186, which was also a great race. Yes, Max dominated the Drivers' Championship, but what we saw him achieve this year is a level of dominance we do not often see. And really, it is history in the making. And look, we look back on the Schumacher dominance in the early 2000s, the Ferrari Schumacher dominance, like, yeah, that was something special. Look, go some years into the future and we will be probably looking back on this, Max and Red Bull dominance, in the same kind of way. So when you think about it, it's not been that bad of a season. And just a note on video scheduling, I'm aiming to upload a video every Friday during the winter break. But however many minutes later after this video started, my review of how this season has been for the 10 teams is done. What did you think of the 2023 F1 season? Who impressed you the most? Who were you least impressed by? And what was, in your opinion, the race of the season? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.